I want to preface this video by first saying that the stories I'm about to share are simply to help paint the full picture of what I experienced growing up and how those experiences shaped me into the person that I used to be before my healing journey. If you're easily triggered by foul language and abusive experiences, I would not recommend watching this video. This is not about blaming my parents or anyone from my past, nor do I encourage anyone who watches this video to blame anyone from their personal experiences either. Blaming others keeps us trapped in victimhood, and I'm sharing my story with the intention to empower anyone who relates to liberate themselves from the shackles of their past and reflect on how people's behaviors, parents or not, may have negatively impacted you and the way in which you navigate life. I'm well aware of the fact that my situation could have been much worse, and that there are plenty of people out there who have or are currently suffering through even greater degrees of abuse. I'm also not minimizing mine or anyone else's experience with abuse, because no matter what degree, it still negatively impacts us all. I'm sharing my own story in hopes to shed light for anyone who's gone through similar experiences and offer ways that can help you heal from your past, show up to life in a new way, and ultimately become the version of yourself that you were destined to be. If you've tuned into some of my earlier videos, you already know that I had a rocky relationship with my mother. Things progressively got worse after my parents got divorced when I was 12, and by the time I turned 16, she was in and out of my life whenever she pleased. Prior to turning 29, I never had the guts to stand up for myself, even though deep down I knew that our dynamic was killing me. One time when I was around 4 years old, I sat in a lawn chair baking in the hot summer sun while my mother cleaned and vacuumed out her car. I told her that I had to go to the bathroom, and she yelled at me, "You're going to have to wait until I'm done." Not wanting to get yelled at again, I sat there and held it as long as possible. Once I knew I couldn't hold it any longer, I cried out one last time, "I really need to go to the bathroom." She hissed back, "I told you to wait, I'm not done yet." And just like that, I shit my pants while sitting in that tiny lawn chair. As soon as she was done and discovered what happened, she completely lost it on me. And just like she always did, threatened me with her famous, "I'm gonna kill you, Valene. I can't believe you would do such a thing. I told you to wait." I could never win with her. Whether I spoke up or not, I always got yelled at. This experience programmed me to believe that I was a burden, and that expressing my needs meant that I was going to get yelled at. I even went as far as holding my pee every day all throughout elementary school until I got home, because I feared that my teachers would get angry with me. And there were a few times where I couldn't hold it any longer and would just go in my pants, tie a sweatshirt around my waist, and ride the bus home smelling like urine. I was already bullied pretty bad back then, and days like that only made it worse. I was never allowed to hang out with my friends, sleep over at their houses, or even have anyone over at ours, which made it very difficult for me to develop socially like a normal child, and so bullying followed me all throughout my life because of it. My mother would also get angry about having to pay a $25 copay to bring me to the doctors when I was sick, or if I needed to go for a routine cleaning at the dentist. She would complain about having to buy me school clothes every year, and would even bitch to her friends on the phone about how I sucked her into buying me a lollipop, when she was the one who offered for me to pick one out to begin with. She trained me from a very young age to shut off all of my needs and to make myself as small as possible. This resulted in me becoming a high-functioning people pleaser who would sacrifice myself to the ends of the world for others while receiving nothing but maybe a couple of breadcrumbs in return. And one of the worst things about our relationship was the fact that no matter who we ran into in public, everyone would say, "Wow, you're so lucky to have a mom like yours. She's so funny." When in reality, nobody actually knew who she was behind closed doors. I remember always wishing that we had the kind of mother-daughter relationships I saw on TV. But unfortunately, my mother literally never showed any affection towards me growing up. She never hugged me or curled up on the couch to watch a movie with me. The only affection she ever gave me were quick pecks on the cheek when she dropped me off at the school bus stop, which were so hard and abrupt it felt like she was punching me in the face. Once my parents started going through their divorce, my dad hired a law guardian for me to talk to about my home life. As soon as I disclosed the fact that I was terrified of my mother because she was constantly telling me that she was going to kill me, he looked me square in the eyes and said, "I'm not technically supposed to tell you this, but I want you to know that you will be living with your dad." Relief washed over me in a way that I had never felt before. Knowing that there was a light at the end of the tunnel after 12 and a half years of abuse made me feel a level of safety that I had never experienced before. It felt like there was finally hope for me to have some semblance of a normal childhood. The day my dad and I moved out, she wouldn't let me take any of my things, and as we were putting our shoes on at the door, she screamed at both of us, "Get the f*** out of my house right now." My mother told my dad that she was going to take him to court to get full custody of me because he was going to pay her child support. And the only reason she even wanted me to stay with her was because she had already been paying child support for my older half-sister that she gave up on her second birthday. So making my dad pay her child support was her way of getting paid back. Instead of spending time with me on her weekends, which was every other weekend, she would either leave me at the trailer and I'd have no idea when she was coming back, or she would drop me off at some random guy's house while they went out to party all night. And one time she even unexpectedly dropped me off at a strange man's house, and they made me babysit his 4 young children between the ages of 1 and 6. This was before cell phones were a thing, so if something did go wrong, I had no way of contacting her. And I had never even babysat one kid before. I stopped going with her on her weekends once I turned 16 because I was so sick of being carted around everywhere and having to deal with her creepy boyfriends always checking me out when she wasn't looking. Sometimes I wouldn't hear from her for 6 months or even a couple years at a time. And any time that we did talk on the phone or in person, she'd capitalize on the entire conversation and complain to me about everything that was going on in her life. The moment I tried to intervene and talk about myself or things that I was going through, she'd cut me off and either talk over me or end the conversation altogether. The thing that really drove it home for me in recognizing that my mother was never going to care about me was the time that my ex-fiance and I broke up in 2013, and her response was, "I'm too busy, I don't have time for your shit." Then she disappeared from my life completely for over 2 years. Having spent a solid year and a half digging through my childhood trauma, I finally found the courage in July of 2018 to speak up for that scared little girl who wanted nothing more than to finally be seen and loved by her mother. I remember it like it was yesterday. We met up for dinner a few weeks after my 29th birthday, and I finally opened up about the fact that I had been working with a healer and had been digging through my past experiences with her and how they were still affecting me as an adult. My voice cracked and shaked as I shared specific memories that had really shaped me as a person and how I was showing up to my life. It was the first time I ever truly stood up for myself, and it was against the one person I feared the most all my life nonetheless. At one point I could see her mask slowly fall as she let out a couple of tears. Up until then, I had never seen my mother cry before. I thought that I was actually getting through to her, and I even felt my heart space open and expand across my chest as I continued to speak my truth, almost as if my inner child was hugging me for finally being so brave. As soon as I let out a sigh of relief, her immediate response wasn't "I'm sorry." Instead, all she said to me was, "Well, at least I didn't physically beat you like my mother did to me," in a tone that I could only translate as, "You should be grateful," when in fact my mother would make up all kinds of stuff in order to get my dad to spank me when he would return home from work. When I pointed that fact out to her, she said, "Well, that's because he always liked you more than me." She always treated me like I owed her something, when all I ever showed her was respect. But her response to me finally opening up to her that night really said it all. She was always jealous of me. I remained hopeful that this conversation would finally put the past behind us and bring us closer together, but unfortunately that was not the case. A few weeks later, she texted me while I was in the middle of shooting a wedding to ask if she could borrow several hundreds of dollars in order to cover for her so that her new husband wouldn't find out that she ran up their credit card bill. I was completely self-employed at the time, so I certainly didn't have the ability to just hand over such a large amount of money that I'd probably never see again. And considering her track record of cheating on my dad for over a decade, I could only imagine that she was probably cheating on her new husband, who conveniently was a widowed man close to 30 years older than her and had been diagnosed with cancer right before they tied the knot. I had absolutely no idea how to respond to such an insane request, considering I thought that we had finally made a major breakthrough in our relationship when I last saw her, but clearly I was wrong. About 3 weeks later, I went to Soul Camp, which was basically a summer camp for adults that was chock full of a variety of workshops to help you get in deeper touch with yourself on a soul level. It wasn't until the final workshop I attended called Boundary Boot Camp when I realized exactly why I was meant to go there in the first place. Up until that workshop, I had only heard of boundaries, but never really understood what they meant. Terry Cole, who hosted the workshop, said that boundaries are what separate you from others. They let people know what you are and are not okay with. And when we don't have proper boundaries, we strip people from truly knowing who we are authentically. She also coined the term boundary bully, which is a person who, no matter how many times you set a boundary with, still continues to cross them. So many things clicked for me during that hour-long workshop, and it made it very obvious to me that I definitely did not have any boundaries whatsoever. In fact, I was taught to never speak up for myself or even have my own opinion about things at all. Back then, I was still very much a people pleaser, and I would let anyone and everyone walk all over me, especially my mother. And to be honest, I was actually quite angry that I had just been learning about boundaries and healthy relating for the first time in my life at 29 years old. But I also knew that it was my chance to finally take my power back and protect my well-being. Weeks went by, and my mother still kept trying to get me to respond to her texts. It was apparent to me that she wasn't dipping back out of my life again anytime soon, and I really needed to make a choice before I lost my mind. Knowing that she was never going to take accountability for her part in our tumultuous relationship, the only sensible thing that I could think to do was finally cut contact with her so that I could fully heal myself. I ended up sending her a super long text explaining my choice of going no contact in order to protect myself from her further inflicting pain upon me. I also made it very clear to her that I didn't want her reaching out to me for any reason at all, and that if I decided at any point in the future that I would like to have a relationship with her, that I would be the one to contact her first. I wasn't super proud of the way in which I went about it, but I was still very much terrified of her as an adult. And if I hadn't done it that way, I never would have done it at all. And just as I anticipated, she sent me an equally long text back telling me how selfish I was and that I should be ashamed of myself because she's my mother. It took a lot of willpower not to text her back, since I was still very much drowning in guilt and shame, two emotions that a people pleaser knows all too well. Not to mention the fact that no child, not even an adult child, wants to go no contact with their parent. As humans, we are naturally hardwired to do whatever it takes to gain the love and approval of our parents, and all we really want is a healthy, loving relationship with them. Had she taken accountability for the way in which her words and actions affected me throughout my life, and changed her behavior so that she didn't further hurt me, then I would have loved for us to continue to heal and grow together. But instead, she tried to sweep the abuse under the rug and make it out as if it weren't that big of a deal and that I should just get over it. I never spoke to her again, though she did send me a nasty email in February of 2020 where she told me that I was going to hell and that she hopes that I marry an abusive man who treats me like the piece of shit that I deserve to be treated like. I never responded because I know that's exactly what she was looking for, a response. And her email only further confirmed that I had made the right decision to remove her from my life. This entire experience taught me that it's absolutely futile to confront a narcissist about the abuse that they've inflicted upon you, because admitting that they've done anything wrong would only hurt their precious ego and self-image. If you do attempt to shatter the delusions that they've created for themselves, they'll either turn the blame onto you or to someone else entirely. Narcissists work hard on maintaining a very specific public image and getting everyone else to see them as amazing, charismatic, and sometimes even charitable. Which means if you ever try to call out their abuse, no one will ever believe you because everyone perceives them the exact opposite of who they actually are behind closed doors, and will automatically think that you're the problem. The only way to safeguard yourself from further being abused by a narcissist is to go completely no contact with them, and oftentimes everyone that's connected to them too. I realized that I kept attracting people just like her into my life, such as my abusive ex, because I was basically repeating the same dynamic with other people and trying to get them to see me and value me just like I had with my mother all those 29 years of my life. And the result of those relationships just kept reflecting back the same way that she had treated me. These patterns were teaching me how to love myself by no longer allowing these kinds of people into my life. Looking back, I could easily see that I was so desperate for a mother's love that I'd often cling to exes' moms to try to fill that void. That's when I discovered that I had been giving more of my personal power away than I thought, and started finding healthy ways to reparent my wounded inner child. Reparenting yourself is essentially becoming the person you needed when you were growing up. Some of the ways I started doing this was by paying even closer attention to my thoughts, recognizing when I was judging myself, and reversing those self-judgments by reaffirming new positive beliefs about myself. I started setting healthier boundaries within all of my relationships and actually speaking up when something was bothering me instead of stuffing it back down out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. I started practicing saying no to things that felt like an obligation in order to say yes to myself and my own well-being. I listened to my body when I was feeling tired and needed to rest, and started giving myself permission to have more fun and express myself in ways that I used to be too embarrassed and ashamed to do prior, like dressing the way that I wanted regardless of what people said, and going after new goals and dreams that people told me were silly. Slowly but surely, I started taking my personal power back and becoming my own autonomous adult. My safety and feelings finally took precedence for the first time in my life, and it was both necessary and liberating to say the very least. In a way, I'm grateful for this experience because it taught me everything not to do to my own children once I have them in the future one day. The last thing I would ever want to do is take out all of my pain onto them that was inflicted upon me as a child. Ever since my spiritual awakening, I've dedicated my life to this inner work and healing, and all of the generational trauma and abuse passed down to me from both sides of my family is ending with me, period. Just because we're physically capable of bringing children into this world doesn't mean that it's for everyone. I strongly believe that if you are unable or unwilling to give your children a better life than the one that you had, then you do not belong having children at all. And I believe that a lot of the younger generations are choosing to not have kids because they're terrified of fucking them up the same way that their parents did to them. The beautiful thing, however, is that we all have the ability to heal our unhealthy patterns and behaviors and become better versions of ourselves so that we can be healthy adults for our current or future children. The only two ingredients that we need in order to heal ourselves is self-reflection and processing our past experiences, both of which are absolutely free. And I'm not saying that anyone needs to be perfect in order to be a parent, as perfection is not even realistic. But self-awareness and intentionality is absolutely attainable and necessary, especially when we're raising the younger generations who will eventually one day become adults themselves. I believe that every single one of us plays an equally important role in this life. Who you are and how you choose to show up to life ultimately affects the people around you, which creates a ripple effect on the grander scale of it all. Not everyone has understood my decision to go no contact with my mother, and I've often received a lot of criticism for doing so. However, I have noticed a pattern that most of the people who've gotten upset about my choice are either A, narcissists themselves, or B, people who have been through similar experiences but are unwilling to acknowledge the abuse from their own upbringing. We're all on our own unique journey, and I'm not here to judge anyone either way. But I will end this video by saying that one of the greatest ways to love and respect ourselves is through setting healthy boundaries. So if there are people in your life who are committed to misunderstanding you, you may want to reconsider whether or not there's still a place for them in your life. Because empathy without boundaries is self-harm. Take back your power by putting your needs first. If it doesn't feel like a fuck yes, then it's a hell no. From the moment that we first met, I knew that you came into my life for a reason. Thank you so much for being my best friend for the last 10 years, and the greatest adventure buddy I could ever ask for. You were the perfect balance of feral and domestic, and you helped bring me closer to nature and my own wild self. I miss hearing your ironically heavy paws running across the floor the moment that I walked through the door, and how you'd roll over for me to pet your belly, knowing that it would deter me from giving your sister pets too. I keep replaying all those times that you'd sneakily follow me to the woods, and when I'd stop to see that you were behind me, you'd nonchalantly stop to look behind you and act like you'd been casually hanging out there the whole time. I miss how you'd let Bea and I walk ahead just so you could run full speed to catch up with us, and all of the times that you'd parkour off the trees in the woods when you had zoomies. I'm so incredibly grateful to have had you by my side through some of the darkest moments in my life. I thought that I was saving your life that day when I brought you home, but the truth is that you saved mine. I love you so much, Zozo. Your memory will truly live on in my heart for the rest of my life, until we meet again.